Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome to today's program Jim Davis, who's a VP of Optimization Solutions at MercuryGate. And today we're going to talk about TMS optimization, transforming or transitioning from a nice-to-have to a must-have. Now, the word optimization is ubiquitous in the supply chain logistics industry. We all talk about how we have to, optimize our operations. But in practice, very few companies, relatively few companies are using, optimization, technology. In the past, a lot of companies believe that, they didn't need optimization, but is that true today? What factors are, causing this transition in terms of making transportation optimization not be a nice to have, but truly be a must have? And, how are companies leveraging optimization, transportation optimization to improve their operations and to deliver business value? Well, those are some of the questions we're going to discuss in today's episode. And it's great to have Jim back in the program to kind of share his insights and perspective on this topic. So, Jim, welcome back.
Hey, thank you. Glad to be back.
So, Jim, like I said in my comments right now, historically for a lot of companies, I know when I talked to them about TMS implementations, TMS optimization was usually something that was kind of a phase 2 project, right? So they would focus first on the execution side of things, maybe tendering, routing guide, track and trace, and so forth. And they will get to optimization in phase 2 because they viewed it as either it wasn't an immediate priority or it was just a nice to have. And the reality was they never really got to implement the optimization piece. I mean, what's changed today? I mean, are you seeing companies now prioritize optimization? And if so, what's driving this kind of change in perspective in terms of the importance of optimization?
Sure. So as you would expect, companies where transportation is not their core competency, they produce goods or whatever, they really have to have market pressures, either on the cost side or the sales side, revenue side, to pressure them into focusing on the cost side, which one of those costs is transportation. So, those can be many variables. There's, we could spend hours talking about this, but some of the basic ones are, capacity within the market. So, there has been some relaxation in capacity, but it still remains a relatively tight market. Next would be supply chain efficiency. So, an efficient supply chain is great, but when it breaks, it really breaks, right? So, because, if it breaks down, you run out of things really quickly because of faster turns and so forth. The next would be consumer empowerment. So with the online retailers, for example, you have a user, if he wants to receive something next day, well, there's huge cost implications to back in from that, all the way from the warehouse and transportation. And it limits the possible scenarios that you can apply, right? So you're applying more constraints to the overall solve or the overall supply chain. So basically with those variables, supply chain optimization or transportation optimization facilitates the ability to react and exist within those environments.
Yeah, no, I think I hear the same thing from a lot of the companies. I see a lot of the same things. I mean, one of the common threads I hear is, hey, we're now forced to make smarter decisions faster. And,
absolutely,
we might have been able to get away in the past with spreadsheets and spending maybe 2 or 3 hours trying to figure something out, or, just throwing a bunch of labor at the situation. But, the time windows now are much more compressed in order to make sure that you're doing things the right way. You mentioned, customer requirements or things like e-commerce and all that. I mean, in the past couple of years, we've seen what's happened with a lot of companies with on time in full, where all of a sudden now, if they're not able to meet these on time in full requirements, they're getting penalized or maybe even losing the business. And I think you and I, as consumers, we've become spoiled because of, Amazon and all that. We expect to see visibility. We expect to have things, same day and free,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
We all know transportation isn't free. So somehow you have to be able to, manage your operations intelligently to, minimize that cost impact. So speaking of cost, I mean, I know when I talked to a lot of companies in the past around optimization and whether they were going to implement it or not, kind of the two things that always came up at the top are kind of cost and complexity, as the two main reasons why they passed on implementing it. at least in phase one. I mean, some of the things I would hear is like, I think you need to have like a PhD in mathematics in order to be able to, use optimization.
Sure.
Was kind of the common perception out there. I mean, are optimization solutions today, still, I mean, were they ever that difficult to use? Are they still that difficult to use today? And is it really cost prohibitive?
Right. So I think if you make the decision, hey, I'm going to build my own optimization solution, well, you should probably start searching for some PhDs to help you write the algorithms. Absolutely. But there's lots of commercial applications out there now, and they really have taken the perspective from where you have a super complex optimization solve and packaged it in a way that it's easy for a savvy business user to leverage those tools. It's not a problem anymore. And things are done in user interfaces. People aren't having to write code anymore to modify logic of an optimizer at MercuryGate. So in terms of dealing with the cost of implementation, so there's the one piece where the solutions have gotten better, much more user friendly. But then also people have over time, over the last 10 years, really started to establish best practice models for doing like pull distribution or multi-stop truckload and so forth. At MercuryGate, we introduced late last year a concept called Mojo to Go, which is effectively a library of best practice models, online training, and basically a full documentation of how to do things. So that's one of the approaches that are used. Control the cost of implementation.
Yeah, no, great examples there. And I think, the user interface, I think, has been huge because you're right. I mean, I think in the early days of optimization, you really had that one person, that one individual within the organization who, whenever you needed to change a constraint or you wanted, or wanted to try something different, you had to really go into the code and, write some math, if you will, or whatever to kind of set it up or really understand what you were doing. So that you wouldn't, you didn't end up in the situation where you had, garbage in, garbage out because the optimization wasn't really, accurately modeling what you were trying to do. And I think you fast forward to today, and I think a lot of that heavy lifting is done by folks like you in terms of, the developers, if you will, the technology companies that put all that heavy lifting in the background. And almost like I make the comparison, even just like with me with Talking Logistics, right? I built that website. I've got like zero IT capabilities, but WordPress makes it so easy with widgets and things like that to configure everything else. I mean, that's a very simplistic example, but I think from a user interface standpoint, I mean, optimization engines have adopted similar kind of philosophies where a business user can come in and really do what they need to do without having to really know what's going on in, the guts of the engine, if you will, because it's been designed in such a way that, enables them, to do that. And to your point, I think there's a lot of off the shelf, if you will, widgets or predefined modules that people can use that already been, tested and foolproof, if you will, to implement. So let's talk. So let's talk now about the different types of transportation optimization, because it's a fairly broad category, and there's different types of it. I mean, can you share some examples and the types of TMS implementation and kind of what are some of the benefits that they provide?
Sure. Well, my focus is generally on the most complex of the complex. We pretty much have the simple consolidation, multi-stop truckload, those types of things. Those problems have been solved for many years. What has changed is like we talked about with the supply chains becoming more efficient and also more complex. We've had to move into other areas. So some of the ones that are the most interesting to me are the continuous optimization within a multi-tier pull or cross-dock network. So those are like as things come into the supply chain or come into a pull network, as time passes, the whole inventory picture changes and where things are. So it gives you opportunities to dynamically adjust your optimization solve as time progresses, still in a batch process, but in predictable intervals. So that particularly, I think, has tremendous potential for the industry and within my product that I support. Another one is zone skipping. So with the, with more and more of the Amazons and people like that, the online retailers, parcels getting shipped more and more. So in order to shift some of the costs, because, effectively with parcel, if you're in New Jersey and you're shipping to Southern California, it's not a great zone combination there. So, the ability to shift things over to a service center in Southern California and ship within your same zone, if you have the volume to scale and make that line haul distribution cost effective for you, those are huge benefits that many customers are seeing as a result of optimization. Another one for the manufacturers, so doing coast to coast intermodal transfers using rail schedules. That's another one, because in general, you can save quite a bit doing intermodal consolidation and deconsolidation. So those are the ones that I think have been most impactful over the last couple of years.
No, those are great examples, and I mean, I think they illustrate the fact that the types of modes that companies are using today are much more diverse, and particularly with parcel now becoming a greater part of the mix for a lot of companies, whether they're drop shipping or they're doing the direct to consumer, or that's become. I mean, I know years ago when I first started doing TMS research, 20 years ago. Parcel wasn't even a blip on any, most companies' radar, right? It was mostly truckload and less like truckload. But now you're seeing, parcel, you're seeing rail, you're seeing intermodal, you're seeing so many different, modes, and the possible combinations of where of how you can flow product or combine orders is really beyond the scope of what someone can do in their head or within a spreadsheet in terms of doing it in a realistic time frame, or do it pretty effectively. So when it comes down to, I mean, you talked a little bit about the basic blocking and tackling capabilities of optimization, which have been around for a long time. Like you said, hey, let's take these LTL orders and combine them into a truckload order, and now you're saving money there by simplifying that and shifting the mode, if you will. So more broadly, I mean, I guess when it comes to, selecting an optimization solution, I mean, what are some of the capabilities or attributes that the company should look for, when it comes to, evaluating and selecting one?
Mm-hmm. So what I always recommend is buy the solution for who you want to be, not necessarily who you are. So that's kind of the first thing. So, the guy today that's, ships paint, right? And, the view of himself may change over time. So make sure that, he looks at the functionalities that are available and look at a picture of a software that can support ultimately who they want to be or who they could potentially become or want to become. Next, that's really important is the ability to do what-if analysis. So not just pure execution optimization, but actually to be able to take historical or predicted or perceived data and do analysis on it that will help you make decisions for your future supply chain, right? That's really important. And then the next one, and this one is often overlooked, is the ability for a solution that facilitates automation, right? So yeah, it's great if you can build an optimization plan, right? But if you have to go in and key it manually in the system every single time, or you have to click a button and Jane Doe has to be there to press play every day to make the solution run, those aren't optimal, right? So really something that allows you to just run either automatically or based off some business event or based off of the schedule. Those are the optimal solutions for optimization, not only just the actual core functionality, which we talked about previously.
The what if one, I think, is particularly important. I mean, I think I see more and more of that today, and that to me falls under the umbrella of, risk management, right? I mean, there's so much going on in the transportation industry, today, whether it's, what if rates go up? What if, there's a strike? What if, now you want to flow product, in a different way? And to be able to model that and understand ahead of time, what the service implications are, what the cost implications are, what that might look like. What I always tell folks, companies that are the most prepared are those, whenever any kind of disruption occurs or any kind of change occurs, are those that have performed these types of what if analysis. They've done the homework, and they've developed a response plan. So if and when it happens, whether because of some disruption or whether because they deliberately want to move in that direction, they've already done that kind of analysis. So I think that that's an important point, because I think a lot of times we think of optimization purely from the day-to-day operation side and how to leverage it. But I think there's also a role for optimization in this more tactical and strategic and from a risk management standpoint. So Jim, we're running short on time here, so I'm just going to go right to my last question here. I mean, as a way to wrap up, I mean, so what questions should companies ask themselves to assess whether transportation optimization is truly a must-have for them?
Sure. So it's really a function of two variables. So the first one would be volume. One, do your users have the ability to manually create one load per order, or do any types of consolidations or strategies that you have? So it's those are the two variables. So volume and complexity of your supply chain. Those are very easy to evaluate because it's basically a time study, right? But when I look at it, almost always I'm saying there's ROI in this. Okay, and one of the and most if your customers are evaluating, or there's people out there that are evaluating TMS and optimization solutions, one of the things to do is ask for an ROI evaluation. We can take a look at your historical information and say, had you used an optimizer using these basic strategies, you would have saved this amount of money. Oftentimes, almost every time I do a study, that optimization can fund an entire project.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that this is kind of another rule of thumb. If you find yourself that you're throwing more and more people at at a problem or at your operations because you just can't, they're spending hours and hours doing something, that ultimately, in a lot of cases, means the more you need a TMS if you don't have one. And number two, even if you have a TMS, but if you don't have optimization, you spoke earlier in terms of being able to automate, and build optimization into the workflows and automate some of those processes. I think, if you're having to throw more people at the problem, I think that's another, red flag. And certainly if your metrics are all heading in the right direction and you have no idea how to bring them down, right? If costs keep going up and service levels keep deteriorating, and you've thrown as many bodies as you can at the problem, you're still not, going in the right direction. I think that's another clear sign. Well, Jim, like I always say at the end of our episodes, we always manage to scratch the surface on these topics. And this is certainly one of those, meaty topics that we could probably spend hours talking on, but I think you provided some good food for thought and, questions for companies to think about, particularly those that aren't using optimization today, whether, they should take a second look at it and finally begin that phase 2 that they put off, a few years back. So again, thank you for making the time to be with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either on the at the MercuryGate website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or comment for Jim, you can post it there, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.